So, libraries. Let me start with this here. So in the 9th grade in Germany, if you live in Lower Saxony of Germany, there's something called library nights. So they take the pupils into a library, and then you sleep one night in the library on the ground. So this is the ground. And the task is to read one book overnight and then present that book in the next day to the class. And I picked a book about HIV. Read the book, got fascinated by viruses, and presented the next day this book, and then said at the end, I want to go to virology, fight HIV, and win the Nobel Prize. My German teacher, very dry German, said, okay, then do it. I haven't won the Nobel Prize yet. However, I went into virology. So my background, I'm Ijad, I'm Ijad, and I studied medicine and computer science. I did my PhD thesis in virology and also did some research in radiology imaging. I'm the guy in the middle, not on the left, even though I start to look more and more like my professor. And the guy on the right is my co-founder of ResearchGate, who was my PhD student. When I did research, the one thing I realized, this is my research time in Boston, I realized that this is always the same thing you do as a scientist. You do research, you generate data, you take this data, publish it somehow, either go into a conference or you publish this in a journal. Then you try to get money or to do research again. I call this the researcher's life cycle. And the one thing I realized when I was doing research is like the majority of information which I'm creating as a scientist is not being shared and published. The minority of information I publish in journals, but like 95% of what I really did was never published, especially when we talk about failed experiments, things which didn't work. So then the idea was, at one point I talked to the guy on the right, to Sören, and said, Sören, why is there not a platform where scientists can connect and collaborate, where we can share our information directly with each other? So this was the moment when the idea was born. This is the image which we created 13 years ago. I still use it. It still brings like the clear value propositions we tried to create from the beginning, which is communicate, collaboration, discovery. And then we started ResearchGate. And if you look at the start, the beginning, this is our office, our first office. And you will see during the presentation I'm going to lose more and more hair. This is correlating with the stress you have as a startup founder. And you see on the bottom left, this was the first article which was published about ResearchGate publicly, and this was published in Science. So I never made it into Science as a scientist, but as a blurb, small blurb in the Science magazine, they talked about ResearchGate in 2008, talking about 1,000 users at the time. You also see the design from this time, which is more or less ugly. Then in 2008, I decided to work as a medical doctor because I needed to make money, and went into the hospital. After 3 months of working as a doctor and trying to build up ResearchGate, I realized focusing on two things or doing two things full time just doesn't work, especially for the safety of the patients. I went then to this guy, his name is Professor Manz. I can't mention his name now because we are now friends. I said, oh, maybe I should go to the chief of this department and ask him for a half-time or part-time position. I went to him, I prepared my speech, what I think ResearchGate will do for the world if we're connecting the researchers directly with each other, and give them an opportunity to share data and knowledge in a technology way. And so I prepared all that, went into the room, started to give my speech. After 2 sentences from my 6, 7 sentences, I want to say, he started to become very loud. You're 28 years old, you're almost a professor, why are you throwing away your academic career? Scientists aren't social, you're not going to change this, get this Firlefanz, this is the word for bullshit, get this bullshit out of your head. So I call this the Manz moment. His name is Professor Manz. Then I thought about this for a second and quit my job. Went back to the United States. and called my professor who's in the middle, Rajiv, because I said, hey Raj, I have this idea. I really want to work on this idea. I really think this can change the world. And I want to do this. And he was very supportive. He said, come back here and we'll give you a part-time position as a researcher at MGH here in Boston, and the other half you can work on ResearchGate. I even give you money so you can pay for the service. This was the start of ResearchGate in 2010. What the product has become is more than we were thinking at the time. So ResearchGate, I'm sure some of you know it, it's a place where researchers can represent themselves and the research, everything they have created. Doesn't matter if it's a conference paper, data, publication, metadata, everything what they created. What they then get are two types of feedback. One is statistics about the work, real-time statistics, but they're also qualitative feedback, which are comments. People commenting directly to their research works. This whole commenting and this whole statistical feedback they get gives them an opportunity to connect to other researchers again, who they can collaborate with and work with. Last but not least, obviously, it's a way then to discover research by connecting to people. And this way of discovering research and connecting people really, at the end, is creating progress in this world. And this was the first example we accidentally found within our network, where two researchers, one from Nigeria, Emmanuel, and another researcher from Italy, Orazio, found each other on ResearchGate. So Emmanuel had a child in his hospital, which unfortunately died, and he didn't know why. So he was sharing into ResearchGate, into the question and answer feature we have, said, I have a problem, I have this child which died, I don't know why, and I'm suspecting something XYZ. Then a professor from Italy, Orazio, said, okay, send me the blood samples, I can analyze them here for you, which he did. Ultimately, what happened is they found a new yeast type, which beforehand only infected human plants, but now it infects human beings as well. They published this work in a journal, and long life collaboration happened between these two people. Yeah, this is how we created a platform from the first day on, where we connect people with people. That was the initial intent. And still the intent. And what we created by doing this is that we created a product where the researcher is in the center of our thinking. But now what happened, and we'll talk about this in our lively discussion more, is the thing we created is now also has a lot of value for the ecosystem around it. And we never saw this coming. However, we see this now coming, that a lot of entities in that industry are interested in the interactions, what's happening in this network, and maybe give them an opportunity to enter or to get part of this community. So what we then have started is working with scientific publishers as the first, let's say, outside non-researcher entity, and we created for them homes within ResearchGate. Todd, where are you? You're one of the most very early adopters of this with Wiley, who said, yeah, we want to have our own pages within ResearchGate, which enables us to connect with the community and present our offering to them. So we have those so-called Home Plus in ResearchGate, but also then we show this on an article level. So if this is an article within ResearchGate and you see how this is branded by Wiley, the important part here when we look at this type of page is that if you, on these publications, you see faces of people. So you immediately can click also on the authors, and you can really interact with these people. Same on the Wiley side. If you see here, there are faces who you can connect with, who are the editors or and who are fulfilling other positions within that journal. So that is very important for every product we build. We want to bring the scientists who do the work into the front and connect them with the people who need them in order to progress their science. What we have done then, we worked with publishers and started to syndicate their content into our system. What you can see here is that the product we have built created from one moment to another more engagement for the scientific publishers. So we didn't build something special, we just fueled the system we have built with the content which the publishers have given us to us. What the findings are very interesting, because first of all, we're not taking away activity from the original sources. So because you could think that, oh, now there's another website which has the content. What does that mean for our original website where the content is residing? No, we didn't take anything away. We added usage. Secondly, we added usage from countries where there was not so much usage before. So there's a different usage pattern when you look globally. And last but not least, the usage is more distributed between very recently published articles and old articles. So, if you look at a journal, if you go to a journal page, the most recent publications are the ones you promote. But obviously, all the research which has been created is equally important. Some research, and you know this, some of the research will become important in 10 years, 20 years. And those things shouldn't vary amongst like all the other stuff is happening, because if you look at ResearchGate, the discovery mechanism is people to people, and then the content is in between, which means at the end, it doesn't matter how old this research piece is. If it matters to me, it's important to me. So recommendation works not only on recency, but also just on relevancy. Yeah, we have been now working with a lot of publishers, and it has taken off over the last 12 months, which is crazy and good, which again shows that we want, as ResearchGate, really connect the world of science. And the world of science is not just the researchers with each other, but all the various players now who will have a connection point to the researcher. And this is also why the growth we have had is representative of the success of this researcher-to-researcher connection. I'm sure you remember this 1,000 users, which was on the first the first article in Science. We have now 24 million users in ResearchGate. We have 70 unique, so people, 70 million visiting per month. But always the most important user for me is still this guy. So 5 years ago, he signed up to our service. So he apparently likes the Burchett now. So then we have at ResearchGate, we have like when we work in our office, we had like a screen where you see the names for signing up. And there was one screen in my office, and at one point I was like, oh wait, this is Michael Matz. He just signed up. And then I checked out the email, because in ResearchGate you need an email address of an institution which we whitelisted. So you cannot sign up with your Gmail or Yahoo account. You need your Harvard.edu or Stanford.edu address in order to sign up to our service. We're adding obviously also not new institutions if we don't have them in our database. So I checked it out, it was him. A couple of weeks later I got an email from him asking if I can be part of a conference which he's organizing, a cancer conference, and I should talk about ResearchGate and the whole success story of ResearchGate. So of course I'm coming. And this was the first time after 8 years not seeing him. So I went to this conference, and he gave the introduction as Matthew did now. He said, this is Ijad. And just as an FYI, I never mentioned his name up until that moment. And so he said, this is Ijad. He came to me, he asked for a part-time position in order to work on this. I did not grant him this position. But I know that people like you, if they want to be successful, they go through walls in order to succeed. And I'm very happy to be part of the story as Professor Burchett. So we are now very good friends. Since then we have been constantly in touch and became very close friends. So I think as an introduction, that should be it. No?
That's good. And we'll just perhaps a couple of you can stay there or sit down as you
whatever you prefer and whatever they prefer. Stay here.
I guess what would be useful. We've given a good brief history, and it makes obvious that the origins of ResearchGate is not the desire to create a company. It's a desire to do something as a researcher dealing with a problem you're finding.
I didn't want to be an entrepreneur when I started, so just to make sure,
And so I guess, part of the question is, given the fact that when I was a librarian, mostly what I knew about ResearchGate is that there were endless problems with publishers about things appearing in ResearchGate, et cetera, and demands that they should come down. Now there are agreements to syndicate content, there is obviously something has changed between then and now. What exactly has changed in the interim?
Obviously, this is always a multifaceted or multifaceted factors who are like influencing this change. But so if I look at when we started ResearchGate, I didn't think about the industries, right? As you said, I was thinking about how do I connect people I want to work with, right? The normal way as a researcher, if you want to connect with another researcher, is to look at a paper, and this was the way I did it. Look at the corresponding author, sending an email to the corresponding author. I need someone who helps me with the cloning of this virus, and then the corresponding author is not answering. So then waiting and waiting and waiting, and then sometimes not easy to find this person you want to work with. So the idea was to bring researchers together. At one point, you know, as you mentioned, the publishing industry started to take notice of us, and you know, some didn't like us that much, then some other people liked us a little bit more, and then we started working with those who liked us more. You see them on the top left, were the first two. And we started working with Springer and Wiley and Rockefeller. We took big ones, small ones, medium ones, so we really tried to understand what are the needs of the various publishers. And what happened is, when they log in into the product, because most of the people didn't have an account, obviously, because you need to be a researcher, you need an email address of an institution, which we whitelisted. So they started to understand what we're not trying to be a Napster for science or a Pirate Hub for science. What we try to do is creating a connection between people. And content, of course, is sort of important, but it's not the most important thing. So they realized this, and then what happened, obviously, we see the open access transition is happening faster than, you know, some of us here in this room would have thought about. And open access means content is available everywhere, in institutional repository, in platforms like ResearchGate, on the pages from the publishers. So as more they're distributing this content in various places, as better is it for science. So all this has also changed really the perception of ResearchGate, and yeah, and then people like Todd, you know, who understand this faster than some other people also who are pushing this then into the industry and changing the industry. Because I think what other industries have done before, if you look at the music industry or if you look at the video industry, those changes are now happening in science. And I think our opportunity is that we not repeating the mistakes what these industries have done, which at the end was in music at the cost for the musicians, at the cost for the people who produce those videos. So I think there needs to be something where we work together as an industry to create the best for all of and use really technology to make science better and really turn this into the next level of collaboration worldwide. And I think I'm talking about, sorry, I think the COVID crisis has seen that everyone was closing the borders, but science did not close the borders. People were across countries, across borders together to solve this problem. And this is very unique to science. And this is something which, you know, we as an industry can do just different than other industries have tried before and failed and had to go through a lot of iterations in order to create a cohesive and strong industry.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions that, when you look here into the left corner, you see Springer Nature and Wiley, yet you also have smaller publishers, society publishers coming to you.
Yes.
To what extent is it advantageous in your mind for a small publisher to syndicate their content as opposed to a very large publisher?
So I think with what we have built with the audience, it is something which you will know what you won't get anywhere else. Right? So you have the people who are producing the content and who see the content they have produced as part of their identity and the reputation they have built in science. And if I want to publish with a journal, and you can come here and you immediately create also a readership. And for the publisher, it gets insights about who's my readership, in which areas, which country, which scientific disciplines. That is obviously also informing your decision as a publisher. What do you want to do? So the amplifying the effect of distribution through a network which we have created is something which you don't get anywhere else than on ResearchGate. So for a small publisher, this can be obviously even more advantageous than for the big ones. The big ones have enough resources to do things, and the smaller ones don't. And I think this is one of the reasons why this could be good for society publishers as well, and even more than maybe than for some others.
Not all society publishers are open access. Can you do things if you're...
Yes, if you're not open access, we also have built an authentication system within ResearchGate. So if you give us content which is behind a paywall, we can deal with that as well and just show to the user who's entitled to that piece of content. I think a good example again is the music industry. If you look at Pirate Bay in the 2000s, Pirate Bay was successful because the user interface, how do I get to music and how do I listen to music, was broken. It was the user interface for the user. How do I get to the music? I don't want to listen to a whole CD-ROM with 10 songs. I want these 2 songs. They matter to me. And then companies came like Spotify, iTunes, etc., etc. They created a product which then is a good user interface, a better user interface. If you look at Sci-Hub, and we know all this problem, this is illegal, but Sci-Hub has a simple user interface. And it is way easier, and I know this from my time, both at the Medical School of Hanover, but also at the Harvard Medical School, accessing a piece of content, if I'm not on the campus, it's just tough. Even sometimes, I remember the software at the Harvard Medical, where even if I'm on the campus, I was like, okay, how do I do this now? How do I get this paper? And we created a service which enables you access content off campus based on the authentication system we built, because we know if Matthew is from University XYZ or not. And this is something which again also will enable, with all the counter-compliant reporting we're offering, etc., will enable the publishers to get a more full picture of what's happening with their content.
And I think it's interesting partly because this whole question of how you gain access to an audience as a small publisher in an environment that's dominated now by a few enormous publishers, and they don't all want to be open access. A lot of them want to maintain the subscription model. So it's worth thinking about whether, rather than saying, I'm not going to let my content start being scattered all over the internet, I want it where I can control it, they actually could get more exposure potentially if they would think about.
And there's a correlation between building and readership and publishing in that journal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of publications, but also publications which have been created using ResearchGate's model to show if I have more readers, it is likely that these people will then also publish in my journal. So building a bond between my journal with researchers is something which obviously then is a very important task in the future, even more than it has been in the past in an open access world.
I think for small publishers who often feel as if the world is conspiring against them in this environment of ever-increasing integration, it's worth thinking about different ways. So how has it, in the years you've been working with publishers, I know when you started you didn't think about publishers, you published with them or you read their articles, but you didn't really deal with them and their business. How has working more closely with these publishers changed your understanding of scholarly publishing, and how does that affect the direction of ResearchGate as a networking site?
I think if you would have looked from outside, and I mentioned that roughly, I mentioned it a little bit before, but if you look from outside, you could see that these two industries, like one big, let's say, network for researchers, and then you have the old publishing world, let's call it like that, that they should be competitors. And you see from the outside, if you zoom out, you would think, oh, now something new is coming and it will disrupt the old thing. And in my opinion, as I said, I think we can do something better than all the other industries which went through this moment, that we don't want to be a publisher. Like for us, it's the connection between people, and publishing is its own topic, very own complicated topic, which we don't want to be. But bringing these two worlds together and try to understand what can ResearchGate deliver for publishers, but also for other players in the ecosystem. So I just had yesterday a conversation with a librarian who said, we have, as a library or as a university, we have problems to offer our service or bring to our services we bought or we purchased to the people who are part of our university. It's a problem. And how do you market? I use the word market your products you have purchased to the people who are allowed to use that. So there is and those are the things which I see in the future, where if we collaborate and if we try to build something which was missing, which is the network between people, and use this identity to almost like as a passport in this world, then some of the infrastructure which has been tried to be built before and never succeeded can be solved with ResearchGate, and this will then influence the whole industry.
Now you have data, as I understand it, to some degree about this syndication work with publishers. What does the data tell you thus far about this? And we'll conclude here and allow questions after this question.
The data, and let me maybe just go back to the slide here. So first of all, with the network of people, allows you to know who's who, and then create obviously insights into who's my readership, who's downloading the article, and who is visiting my page, my publisher's page, or who's visiting the page of company XYZ, and maybe in the future a library page. So we have to think about all these things, how we want to build them, and what the purpose of those is. This is also the reason why I'm here, to understand this world better. It's the first time I'm in Charleston conference, also first time, or second time now, I was in Chicago beginning of the year at one conference, and then SSP, and then now I'm here. So it's the first time visiting these conferences. I'm listening all the time to understand what can we do together. So the data has shown us that, just repeating, we don't take usage away. It's adding usage. It's more global, and older content is as exposed as new content. So they're equally important in our system. These type of add-ons or type of changes of behavior is something we can obviously measure and expose this to the relevant players to then again give them the feedback. Is what we do something which is successful or not, on which level and in which countries, and etc., etc. So yeah.
And we can start in a moment. One of the questions from some librarians might be, okay, you're getting our data to build a business, that's not helping us. So how would you think about the way gathering data in ResearchGate could be helpful to librarians?
Yeah, so I think again, the data we would create, we would expose this to the libraries, for example, and we would obviously discuss it. We don't have a library account yet, so we're talking about the future here. But we need to understand what a library needs. What is it a library would like us to do, or would like from the system? And then the data which is being created. Again, most of the publications we have in our system were shared by our users directly. So even though we're not connecting to the publishers, most of the stuff has been done by the researchers. And we have been approached also by a lot of universities who, obviously you know this, we have to do reporting on how many publications and which department. And then one of the messages that people get, just check out my ResearchGate profile, there's everything. And I think when it comes down to data, it's really about understanding what is needed and what are the things the library will be advanced by this, or a publisher will be advanced by doing X, Y, Z. Most of the data, we know this, right? There's studies about this. I worked in the Digital Council, I'm still working in the Digital Council of the German Cabinet, and we did, as a country, we did the first data strategy. 95% of the data which is produced in this world is never being used a single time. So even people always get about this data, but you need to create data which really is useful to the various stakeholders who want to look at it. And this is something which we want to do from the first moment on in a more collaborative and in a useful way.
Okay, great. Well, let's do this. The purpose of this session is to go from this presentation and discussion to questions you might have. So, and I think we have somebody, yes, with a microphone.
Thank you. Can I just speak from here?
Please.
Okay.
Name and affiliation, please.
Amanda French, affiliated with Crossref, working on the Research Organization Registry. My question is, you mentioned you don't have library partnerships. Do you have university partnerships?
No, not yet.
And then second question, can you speak a little bit more about ResearchGate's role in expanding open access?
Yeah. Let me think where I start. So first of all, I think what we see right now on the open access change is that, again, if I look from a scientist perspective, the world is not getting easier in the open access world. Some of the parts gets easier, but some of the parts don't get easier. So if I need to know, as a researcher, again, we talked about publishing as an example, or even other services, it's very tough for me to know that even, let's go back to 15 years ago when I was in my medical school in Hanover. So I wanted to read an article, and I was about to buy the article for $40. And then I went to my professor and said, no, we have a subscription. You don't have to buy this. So, okay, and what do I do now? You have to fill in this form. This wasn't the time where we had technology. You have to fill in this form, and then you bring this to the library. They will get the article, they will print it out, and then you will get it back in an envelope. So, okay, this is good to know. I didn't know this. So, and this was the way I got a printed out article. Even though this is now 20 years ago or 25 years ago, the concepts are still similar in the internet. So, as a researcher, I have been listening to some presentations. Of course, the librarians think about their problems, the publishers think about their problems, but at the end, it's all about the researcher. Who thinks about the researcher? And it's getting more complicated. So what I would propose is that at one point we should sit together as the various stakeholders and try to understand how we can make the lives of the researcher easier with the open access transition, which is coming, if we want or not, and make their lives easier. So whatever, again, an example which I mentioned before, if you in the system and people uploading already their preprints to ResearchGate, either publicly or sometimes even privately, so no one sees them, they want to just have them in their profile already before they publish them. Now we can tell them, you still have those tokens or those open access tokens left for those journals. So bringing those things together in that moment where the researcher wants to publish or potentially wants to publish is something where a system like ResearchGate in collaboration with others would make the lives of the scientist way easier. And again, I haven't thought about those through yet perfectly yet, but I can see there's a big advantage for all of us if the researcher doesn't waste their time on administrative work. I think this is not what they are being hired for. When you are a university, it's not what you're paid for, but you still have to do it. And I have experienced this myself. So making that easier, making this faster, making this more seamless between all the various services and products, this is the role we can play. And at the same time, obviously, it's distribution. We can, again, the whole syndication or the content within our system connected to people will enable a different way of discovering content. Right? Before ResearchGate, discovery of content is either talking to people in conferences like here, going to a library and looking at journals, talking to your professor, etc., etc. Also, even like I remember when I did research, we had our own library in my department. And the librarian I worked with her when I did research. So she was almost like part of my research because she was reading and almost helped me navigate through what's out there and what I should look at. And I think this is also a chance to rethink maybe the role in the next 20 years of librarians, again, from what was before and what happened and what they can do in the future. So yeah, as I said, I cannot give like a perfect answer because nothing has been written down somewhere, but those are the thoughts I have.
If you managed to simplify the administrative process for the faculty, you would get buy-in, I'll tell you that. Most of us, as you say, the librarians and publishers are thinking about their own problems. The struggles of faculty are something that happens over there, and I'm sure if there are any researchers present, they would agree. So, any other questions? Oh, Boaz.
Hey, Boaz from the University, librarian.
Hi.
Identify. So I'm really drawn to your stories about your beginnings, and also like thinking about your library nights, and the stories that you've read together in the mornings after you've read the book, and and I imagine that a lot of it is happening, right? This is your evidence that researchers are connecting with each other and begin a dialogue, and there is this kind of richness that comes with it. The data that comes with it serves different purposes and is connected to the publishing industry at this point. So to say, like a library night, we should have, because probably we can spend a lot of time on ways by which the library profession can help. Also, and think about ways by which those things come to be. And I'm curious because I think you were starting from saying there's all that stuff that I was looking into, I wrote, I did, and it didn't end up anywhere. And it wasn't like necessarily published in a way that would be discovered. How does ResearchGate answer that at this point? So is there like a home?
Yes.
And if that's where those things lie in, what happens next? And how those things are connected to those stories that you're collecting. Thanks.
I never do that, but I do this now. This is how it looks when you're logged in. What we created is I don't have internet here. Do we have Wi-Fi here?
Yes.
He's the conference.
Do I need
Or
to?
Marriott Bonvoy _conference.
You got it.
You
And
got
no
it?
password.
Okay. So if maybe this answers your question partially. So if you add research to your profile, there are a lot of different types and even subtypes if I go deeper. So we try to build for the user an upload mechanism which enables the user to upload any kind of data. And we have a lot of uploads in raw data, failed experiments, conference papers, so things they didn't publish before, but also they use the publication page. So if I look here, let me see which one to pick. Here. So they are also enriching those pages as well. So I call them shoeboxes. So it's a shoebox, and in those shoebox you can put stuff in which you haven't published before, and which is part of that. So that's also happening. Yeah. So yes, this is part of the solution of the product we have built. Mm-hmm.
So this data collection, the data that you used for your project can then be posted here?
Yes.
Along with the
Yes.
article and so on?
We also have projects. As a user, you can have your own project within ResearchGate when you start a project, and some of them using the project shoebox, project folder, to share in real time what they're doing. And then at the end they say, this is the publication which came out of that project. So yes, we also have projects where you can then constantly share content.
So the data can be connected to the article?
Yes, yes, of course,
And
yes.
is it then publicly available?
Yes,
or-
everything is publicly available. This is also why we have so much traffic. So we have 70 million uniques per month and close to 150 million visits per month. So, and yeah, you saw last year we had close to 4 billion page views. We continue to grow. If you look at the traffic which comes to ResearchGate, the majority of the traffic is, I call them citizen scientists. So people who are not in research, but are reading the content. So we're not only broadcasting the content to other researchers and connect these people with each other, but also the platform has been successful in aggregating the content and organizing it differently because around people, and then show this to the world, to people who are interested in that type of content. And this is something which is also obviously something which is new. And we have a lot of patients who want to sign up to the service because they want to follow other researchers, what they're doing. So we don't have that yet, but again, you see there's interest in what is being created. I still think it's very bizarre. It's like, let's say we are 10 million researchers in the world, not corporate and not HCPs, etc. Just 10 million or let's say 20 million researchers in the world with all the various stakeholders in this. And we have like 8 billion people. The relationship of people who are doing research in this world versus how many people are is crazy. But the content they're producing is very, very important for us as a world. And this is how I explain the interest in that research or that interest into the research from everyone now, and not only scientists.
Hi, I'm Stephen Renter from Coherent Digital. Really intrigued by the presentation, really fascinating. Could you talk a little bit about the business model around content syndication? Small publisher, does it cost to join, how much, that sort of thing?
No, the content syndication is free.
Okay.
There is a, well, maybe, honestly, I let Evan say it. Evan, do you come quickly here?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, he can say, he can give a better answer. And you are a native American speaker, so.
Native English speaker.
Native English speaker,
Okay.
yes.
So hi everybody, my name's Evan Pettyjohn. I'm part of the commercial team at ResearchGate. So to answer your question directly, as Ijad was saying, the content syndication is free, as well as the usage stats. So if it's OA content or entitled content, still free. The entitled content, there's a lot of interest, but we are very aggressively bringing more publishers on board and bringing that content with it. Now, the way that we would monetize this to kind of fund the network, we have additional services that we maybe just a small aside too. I think one of the things that I think is interesting about ResearchGate is the way we funded the network in the past is by being very mindful of what we find valuable for researchers and thinking about what would be valuable for a researcher to see. And in the past, particularly for the life scientists on our platform, that's been connecting them with the products that big life sciences companies like Thermo Fisher or Illumina might want to bring to them, whether it's the reagent or the pipettes for the experiment or the $500,000 genomic sequencing machine. So the way we fund the network today is by using these types of ads and looking at our knowledge graph of what we understand about the scientists and saying, can we bring an ad to them that's useful? And we say no to lots of advertisers that aren't useful, and we try to make the experience as good to the researcher as it can be and helpful. And we ask the researchers generally, frequently, do you find these ads useful? And when they say yes, we keep going with it. Now, we built a marketing stack there. We built an ad technology stack there, using this knowledge graph to bring the right ad to the right researcher at the right time. If I think about a publisher, they have marketing objectives too. And you can almost lift and move this researcher-centric advertising mechanism for a publisher's marketing objective. Call for editors, call for papers, pre and post publishing services. Anytime you want to speak to an academic, to a scientist, to a researcher, we have a platform where they already are with a system that allows them to bring, like, I think, quite beautiful native ads to them at a time that's relevant for them where they want to see it. And one of the things that I think about also when I come to ResearchGate, I spent several years with advertising at Google, and what's unique to me about ResearchGate is not that we just have 24 million researchers. That is already unique, yes. It's a very specific audience that we can target in very specific ways based on their interests and their disciplines. But what's also unique about ResearchGate versus other platforms is the mindset that the scientist has when they come to ResearchGate. They're coming, as Ijad has outlined, to expand their research horizons and connect. And that puts them in a state of mind where they're very open to engage with academic content. So even from an ad point of view, it's attend this webinar, read this white paper, read this ebook. So this state of mind, as well as this targeting technology, allows us to bring ads to them that are relevant and actually kind of relatively in depth. We can do this for publishers too. So we sell advertising to publishers for that type of thing. Call for editors, call for papers, and that's how we monetize. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay. I'll sit over a little closer,
Yeah,
just in case.
Just stay here, don't run away.
Hi, my name is Mark McBride with Ithaca SNR. I'm curious, because it is in your name, has anybody ever researched the network effects of ResearchGate, maybe through such social network analysis, or maybe looking at something like boundary crossing theory, to see if these network effects are actually taking place inside the community?
No research yet. We haven't, there are a couple of people asked for doing it. We haven't done it yet because it's, if you have a small organization, having like external stakeholders sometimes slows the organization down. We really want to do that in the future. But no, we haven't done that yet. I know some people were like waiting for me to open that up. Yeah, one day.
I forgot previous speaker's name, previous questioner, but I wonder if either of you would be willing to explain boundary crossing theory?
Yeah, so,
Your name,
again? All right, Mark McBride from Ithaca SNR.
Thank you.
I usually don't need a mic, I'm Irish enough. So so boundary crossing theory is this notion that when individuals cross boundaries out of their discipline or their specific area of focus, they have these learning experiences, and through those learning experiences they gain different perspectives on their own craft or their own culture or their own environment. And it's usually triggered by like a boundary object. So in this case, you could say that possibly ResearchGate is that boundary object, or you could get really down into the weeds and think about the individual research areas being or the research area, not necessarily the discipline, but probably the research subject area.
Yeah. The one thing we found.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Interesting. The one thing we found is that researchers are connecting in many cases through the methods they have been using.
Yeah.
So I'm not, and this is why if you look at the Q&A section, just check. You never do live things, but I'm doing it. You always things are going wrong if you do it. It doesn't go wrong. Look, good questions. So you see here, those are all like questions which are around a method, and these things create a different way of connecting to people than just saying, oh, I'm doing research in adenoviruses and I'm looking for adenovirologists who are using the PCR technology XYZ and want to work with me on that. And if we do the analysis, I would say I'm confident that we will find something, or we would find something, because you creating a layer or you're creating a node between people which wasn't in their mind before, but it was at the end a PCR. If you use a polymerase chain reaction, it doesn't matter if you're microbiology, in virology, or in cell biology, it's the same technology, and it helps, and you can help people because you understand the technology and not so much the environment they're working in.
Right. I could really nerd out here, so we should talk after.
Yes, please.
Anthony Watkins and Cyber Research. I'm on ResearchGate. I'm an information scientist these days. We interview for 2016 early career researchers and their habits in relation to the scholarly communication system, that is, attitudes and practices And I thought you'd like to know that to some extent we found them less interested in ResearchGate than they used to be. Partly because they're visible, they used to use, most of the people I'm interviewing used it primarily for visibility. But they're using Twitter now, and Twitter particularly, Twitter's come up with, but they're still keeping on ResearchGate. So when I talk to them, what do you still use ResearchGate? Yes, but we are not up to date, but talking to you has made me want to be up to date. They're still thinking serious. But because the majority of the research people, early career researchers I've been interviewing by chance, are actually quite well networked already. They haven't, on the whole, used the facilities you mentioned, the putting up the project questions and so forth, because they don't need to do. I think that particularly people who are less well connected, I can see the point about this, but they don't. The people I'm talking to don't, on the whole, do that. I thought that might interest you.
Please share this with me as a...
I'll tell you more about it later.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you.
Hey, Mike Tackett's from Taylor Francis in Routledge. I just had a question. The journal homepage showed the APCs. Is that tailored based on an affiliation if I'm there, if there's a read and publish deal between Harvard and PublishRex, or is it just the straight list pricing all those APCs?
It is not tailored yet, but
coming.
it's coming. It is the straight prices right now. We will tailor this based on the institution.
And then one separate question. How do you verify those affiliations?
So you mean like the universities, the companies, which are in our back end, which are...
Yeah, I mean, do you still have access to Harvard or the Brigham's entitlements?
So you mean in terms of subscription services, etc.?
Yeah.
Yes. So no, what we get is from the publishers the information, and then we work with those information to decide whether or not an institution is entitled.
How would you know if I'm affiliated with Harvard?
So we have, so in case of ResearchGate, if you sign up to our service, you need to provide an email address of an institution you're working for. And then you claim your research, and we do triangulation of the email address you used, IP addresses you used in the past, because if you once logged in from the campus, we can connect this to the user again. We see if they use an, let's say, harvard.edu address or an Harvard Medical School address, and then we know that this user is a user of that institution. Yes. So this is you cannot sign up to our service only with your Gmail or Yahoo address. This was one of the decisions we made very early, that we want to verify. We want to know that this is a scientist, a real scientist from an institution. Also keeps the spam problem at a very low level. Because if someone is doing bad things and their account is being suspended, then you only have one Stanford address or one Harvard address. So there is no, like, oh, I can produce just more accounts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Daphne Greenwood. I'm with Optica Publishing Group and formerly OSA. I'm curious in terms of when you have content from society publishers on your site or smaller publishers, how are you reporting back that usage to their library subscribers? For those of us that still do have subscription-based content, along with open access content, and that subscription content is, a lot of it is based on usage for renewals.
We don't report this directly to the libraries, but we report this to the publishers, and the publishers then can use this and reporting this to the libraries. So we don't have a direct connection to the libraries. The only connection we have right now is to the publisher and provide all the data and information in a compliant way to the publisher.
Have you found that that's complicating for librarians who are trying to justify?
Now I'm understanding this, to see this is why I'm here. Yeah, good to know.
Hi, my name is Hugh Coors. I'm with SDM Solutions. I'm curious for your perspective. So in a world where the dissemination of content and the discovery becomes sort of increasingly diversified, or folks can discover content in many places. What's your perspective on what will be sort of the core and durable value that journals and journal publishers bring to the table?
Two things, in my opinion. One is a broad spectrum of author services, which are after, or let's put it that way. I think we didn't have enough innovation in the last hundreds of years on the format how information is being published. I think publishers, again, I'm not a publisher, but if I would be a publisher, I would start to rethink the formats and do innovation in how publication, how information is being presented in this world. Currently, we're still using a system which has been designed. Conceptually, if you think of a paper, you have an introduction, material methods, results, and discussion. The paper is designed in a way that you assume that the researcher doesn't have any access to more information than this paper. This is how this was conceptually designed hundreds of years ago, because you don't, if you carry a printed piece of research from Heidelberg to Göttingen for 2 weeks, you cannot say, oh, damn, I would need the material, and then the person has to ride back with a horse to Göttingen, and this takes another 2 weeks. So the idea was always to bring all the information which I need for me as a researcher to understand this research item on its own, without connections to other research items. This was the concept of the paper. And we just copied that concept into the internet. And it's used, in my opinion, stupid. I understand it's easier to do this in the beginning, but longer term, we need to innovate on the formats. So that's, I think, a big thing which publishers and journals can do, working on the formats. And second, the role in quality control they have been playing for a long time can be even strengthened, in my opinion. Because this is something, at the end, I see journals almost like community management. And this is not going to go away. It's even more important, because we, as ResearchGate, are not going to be the community manager. We will provide the platform, but we are not going to manage a community XYZ or manage another community. I think strengthening their value and thinking, okay, we as journalists become more as a community manager, and this includes, in my opinion, not only from a technology side, but also conferences. So we have seen during the COVID times how, and we see this in ResearchGate, how innovation is going down if you're not meeting people. So you cannot strip this away, the human connection between people. It's just, the innovation is not at the same level. Execution is better if you are distributed, because people can focus. But if you want to create something, this is better if you bring people together. And that is, for me, also part of the high level called community management. And I see in the future that the journals will be on the author services, reinventing the formats, innovating on the formats, but then also becoming more a community management system or player in that industry. Again, it's just my thoughts, which Todd will now say, oh, what a stupid idea, yet you never were in this industry, you don't understand the industry.
Thank you, Ijad, very much. We have to stop now, and thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.